And of course, we're watching all the latest developments in blockchain, which brings us to the next section, the Bitcoin mania running wild and free as excitement over the Coinbase IPO continues to build. Let's check in on the latest tremors shaking the land of crypto. Leigh Travers, Executive Director at DigitalX, joins us now live from Perth. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. Look, the Coinbase IPO is historic, isn't it? The valuation that they've put on that company is really, it's just epic.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of the most eagerly watched IPOs, I think, easily of the year, if not of the last few years. We're seeing a valuation there well over 100 billion. I think at the low estimates is around 70 billion. I think it could double that in early trading. So, yeah, that sort of market cap is going to put it ahead of the NASDAQ. It's going to put it substantially ahead of the ASX. And the fact that this exchange has only been around 8 years really highlights the growth that we're seeing within this digital asset class.
So on that theme, what do you think, like Coinbase coming as, does it legitimize the industry a little bit more, just taking it another step away from just being a spec class?
Well, I think it further does legitimize it in that now Wall Street investors have got a company to invest in, that they get the same sort of earnings reports as they're used to from other public companies. And it gives you an insight into that user growth as well that has really more been anecdotal, I think, at this point about the number of users in the digital asset market, which is, I think at Coinbase is circa 50 or 60 million users just on their exchange. So just to provide some tangibility about the users behind some of these platforms, as well as sort of the growth in assets that they're experiencing. I think it was around 150% quarter-on-quarter growth for assets on the platform. With DigitalX as well, we've sort of seen that with our funds. Our diversified fund was up 150% this quarter. And as more and more of that news gets out into more traditional listed company investors' hands, then I think that's going to help legitimize it. As you're seeing, it's coming through from regulated or audited channels, through independent administration. These sort of things help legitimize the industry, and I think is only going to really sort of start the fire for where the market will go over the next few years.
But of course, Coinbase makes a lot of its money from those transaction costs, which are fairly significant when you compare it to other exchanges. So given the fact that you are likely to see further competition coming into the space, are those transaction costs likely to drive prices down and really hit the revenue for Coinbase?
I do think you are going to see some margin compression from Coinbase. I mean, as you mentioned, other digital asset exchanges are charging circa 10% of those prices. And actually, if you look at some of the see-through valuations that public market investors are applying to these sort of investments, because you've got digital asset exchange tokens that are trading, you're seeing 100% sort of growth in sort of valuations within the industry ecosystem because of those revenue multiples and profit multiples that applied to Coinbase. So it's sort of, I guess, lifting all boats within this market, sort of highlighting some of the valuation discrepancies that you get, but also just how early it is. I mean, if you look at 50 or 60 million customers compared to the worldwide potential growth of only 8 years in, margin will compress, but certainly the amount of users within the marketplace is going to grow substantially too. So yeah, I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing such a wild discrepancy between the low end of valuation estimates and probably some of the high end too. It's very early on in the piece.
And Leigh, under DigitalX, as in your company, you've got a Bitcoin fund and a digital asset fund. How is that going in terms of funds under management?
We've put out our recent figures yesterday, circa around $30 million in funds under management, which is nice to see that growing. We've obviously got aspirations at much higher than that, but have only had a smaller period of time in existence in terms of the funds management side. As we start to continue to show that investors in these funds are capturing the value, which is the growth of digital assets, I think that's going to flow through to more fun for us as well. But certainly in terms of funds management performance, the funds are up there with any fund in Australia at the moment. So that's really, really pleasing to see.
So how then do you get those traditional investors interested in your product? What are your marketing plans?
Over the next month, they're pretty active. So I'll be doing my first physical roadshow, which I'm pretty excited about. So going through Sydney at the end of the month. We've got a number of other investor lunches, as well as sponsoring some conferences, which fund managers are presenting at as well. So some of those more traditional measures. We've got a full revamp of our website. It's happening at the moment. Hopefully that'll be out next week. And that will flow through to a lot of the digital marketing we're getting. So it's sort of through Google and some of the more digital platforms. And then as we progress our relationships with a lot of the financial advisors and wealth platforms, that's starting to help as well. So for example, we do have the products already on NetWealth and through Power App as well. Those platform investors that are qualified can get access to it. So yeah, really about building those financial advisory relationships, about getting on more platforms, and then yeah, getting in front of more and more investors, I think is the approach for us as we look to grow that over time.
Leigh, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon from DigitalX.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me.